Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran. I got the cold. I caught it. Finally. Or it caught me. You know the cold that everyone's got? I got it too. I didn't want to miss out. I even have the FOMO when it comes to illness. Anyway, this is me, as always, here with you, but instead of the normal, it's this version, the one with the cold. Today is the third in a series of conversations that I did last week at the 2020 Winter Jazzfest in New York. Today, I'm talking to drummer Mark Guiliana. Mark is one of those musicians who is having at this very moment a profound effect and influence on the way the drums are being played. It's in the sound of his drums and in the setup, but it's also in the way he brings electronic influences into his playing. There's a conversation happening in his playing between the organic, traditional sounds and newer technology. And although he does sometimes play with some electronic toys, sometimes he has a sampler that he uses. In fact, part of the innovation that he's helped to make is to get his acoustic drums sounding more electronic and to approach the drums in some ways as though he were a DJ or a programmer. He doesn't always do this. He's also a very traditional drummer in many ways. He plays in a lot of different settings, but this is a big part of what he's doing. Mark says, repetition is one of the most powerful tools we have in music and in life. And then he explains his concept of proactive repetition. The sound of Mark's drumming and drums are so identifiable, and here he tells me that he thinks sound is everything. He says, if the sound can be right, you can play really anything. Mark was born and raised in New Jersey, and until about 6 months ago, he lived there. Now he lives in LA, but he was in New York for the Winter Jazzfest, and he was the artist in residence this year, which meant that he was invited to put together a series of shows and events over the course of the week. And he did a different show every day with a different group, different configurations, some completely free improvised, some very organized, as is the case with his project Beat Music, his most electronic band, which is basically a through-composed project. I saw him play a duo show with guitarist Bill Frisell for the festival, and we talked about it here, which led to the discussion of what he calls coincidental interaction. As he tells me here, he's a band guy. He's a person who feels strongly about the personal connection, the familial, as he says. And that may be why he says he doesn't like to discuss the music too much with the people he's working with. He says the music does the talking. I talked to Mark just a few days ago in the lobby of the hotel where he had been staying all week. He was headed to the airport right after our conversation to fly to Europe for some gigs with the bassist Avishai Cohen, with whom he played a lot early in his career. Often, when I put these conversations together, I have a nice window of time to talk to somebody, and I'm able to kind of take my time to see how things unfold. But in this case, it was a little more of a stressful situation for me. I got to the Moxie Hotel in the East Village a little before our appointed time, wandered around the lobby, stumbling around the various hipsters splayed out on the sofas and lounging in mid-century modern reading chairs, and I looked for a quiet corner to record. I found a place that I thought would work, apart from the loud music blaring in the background. So I approached the bartender sheepishly to ask if there was any possibility of disconnecting one of the speakers or to turn the music off in the back of the lounge. And this is really incredible, especially when you think about how much cynicism and self-righteousness there is and how many opportunities there are for somebody to just say no. The bartender, a very nice guy, I did not catch his name, but I'm going to call him Spencer because that feels right. But anyway, Spencer said, no problem. He did have control over all the zones in the lobby, and he did turn the speakers off in the back so I could get some good sound. So thank you, Spencer. And thank you, Moxie Hotel East Village. You are all right. You're all right with me. Anyway, what I'm really trying to tell you is that Mark had a tight hour to talk before he had to run to the airport for his flight. So in listening back, I see what I missed, I see what I got, and it was not so leisurely like I would have liked. However, one thing I have noticed, and I noticed it in some interviews I did last year, like the one with saxophonist Chris Potter or even the one with Donald Fagen, is that when I'm talking to a very prolific person or someone with a long resume and lots of experience, rather than getting down in the weeds, bogged down in the specifics, I often tend to go the other way, like into the clouds, philosophical, esoteric even. So did Mark Guiliana and I get esoteric? I don't know. I think we got kind of big picture, though. You can be the judge of that. Third Dash Story is the place to go. Sign up, subscribe to get involved. Check out previous episodes. You like the drums? You like to hear from drummers? Check out the interviews with drummers. Nate Wood, Louis Cato, Bill Stewart, Casa Overall, David Garibaldi, Dave King, all drummers. Now check out this other list of drummers. Butch Vig, he was a drummer before he started producing. Jacob Collier plays the drums. Theo Katzman, good drummer. George Colligan, pretty gosh darn good drummer, that George Colligan. Saxophonist Ben Wendell, not a good drummer, but working on it at present. Drummers are everywhere where you least expect, walking among us. Support the podcast on Patreon and get some bonus things. Patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast. Sometimes you get bonus things if you support me on Patreon. Today, a little snippet that got left out of the episode where we talk about Mark's experience playing on David Bowie's Black Star record and what effect that had on his career. That's just for you patrons. Follow me socially or rate and review the podcast. Write me a letter. Tell your friends. Share the episodes you love. Or just stay tuned and check out this conversation between me and Mark Guiliana just mere days ago in the lobby of the Moxie Hotel. Thank you again, Spencer, for all your help.
Mark Guiliana. I've always said your name, Mark Guiliana. I've heard you say it as Mark Guiliana. What is it?
As you wish. I say Juliana. Maybe that's the Jersey. Everyone in my family says
They say Juliana.
Yeah. But everywhere, Juliana is said more common. I don't know if it's a Jersey version or what.
It is New Jersey Italian, right? It gets kind of New Jerseyfied, all that stuff.
Yeah. Hey, it's, if someone even gets close, I take it. I've heard some rough versions, so I'll take what I can get. I'll never forget, this is like 2004. I was touring with bassist Avishai Cohen.
Who you're going to meet tonight,
exactly,
right?
Yeah. Heading off to Sweden to see him. And it was trio with Sam Barsheshet. Sam Barsheshet. And so Sam's name would get butchered quite often in the listing. Avishai's name would get butchered. And we were in Cleveland. And we show up to the gig and we're like, all right, what's it going to say? It's Avishai Cohen Trio. Got it right. Sam Barsheshet piano. Drums. Ralph Guiliana.
They nailed the last name.
Still to this day, I have no idea where Ralph came from.
I dig
it's just such a... It's so great.
When's the last time you played with Avishai?
We, in the last year, we've played a little bit. Played with him extensively, like right out of college until about 2008. And in 2008, we made a record called Gently Disturbed. And 2018 was the 10th anniversary of that. I did that math in my head. Was the 10th anniversary, and so it was kind of an excuse to play that music again with Shai Maestro, great pianist. And so in the last year or so, played in London, we were in Tokyo, we played a few nights at the Blue Note. We'll do that again this summer. So yeah, it's been nice to kind of re-enter that world a bit.
Do you feel that you're coming back to it with a new energy, with a new identity? I mean, when you first started playing with him, you were essentially playing in his project, right?
For sure, it's still very much his world.
Yeah.
But I think also with Shai too, we've gotten to play so much together. Yeah. The interaction is really comfortable, and we're exploring a bit more.
Yeah.
From this new perspective, which is really fun.
Somebody once said to me about a certain musicians transition at a time in their career, not all, out of being like sidemen to being just collaborators. Like in every project, you sort of become a collaborator. You kind of reach a point where you're not getting called to cut the gig. Right. There's a certain type of player who reaches a point where they're really getting called for whatever they're going to bring into it. And it seems like that, has happened with you.
Yeah, it feels like I'm encouraged to be myself more and more. Yeah. The music does the talking. And strong composition will tell you what it needs without the guy or girl having to say it,
Yeah.
And I think I'm really lucky that I don't really get cold calls much. So much, if not everything I do is like relationship based, familial, So the communication, if there needs to be words, great, but quite often it's very intuitive.
Do you think there are people that would like to call you and don't? I wonder why you don't get cold calls.
I don't know. I think I'm a band guy. I want to be in bands.
I know, man. For you, It's more like I'm going to start, if you want to do a different thing, I'm going to start a different band and then define it in this way.
Yes.
And these are the people and this is the sound of it.
Yep.
Why?
It's just, for me, personal relationships, that's it. It's that stuff makes its way into the music.
Yeah.
And I'm going to play my best when I'm confident and comfortable. And so much of that is birthed from strong personal relationships.
Yes.
You know, like really like true friendships, you know. And in order to achieve that, it's time and commitment, like any good relationship, you know. So
Yes. Anytime is a good time to talk, but I am struck by the sort of timing of this conversation. I mean, we're sitting in a hotel lobby. You are going to go from this conversation to the airport to go to what appears to be like a one-off gig in Europe, more or less.
Yeah, a recording, 2 gigs and a recording, but yeah.
And you're coming off of 10 days as the artist in residence at the Winter Jazzfest. Looking at your schedule, it seems like this has been a week where you were kind of confronted with a musical "This Is Your Life," like a check-in on your life and career up until now. What does it feel like?
It's been amazing. I mean, for me, I'm happiest when I'm playing a wide variety of music. And it's rare to be able to do so in such a condensed period of time, and particularly in one city. So, yeah, it's been a total trip, nothing but fun. Really, the playing every night was the easy part. I was just trying to do what I needed to do to get myself to the gig, and that was always the payoff, you know. But it was an incredible experience. I think, you know, maybe a month or two from now, it'll hit me as to really the weight of it all. Right now, I'm just kind of floating a bit.
The intensity and kind of unrelenting schedule of this week seemed like, I mean, it's not very common for anybody to pivot so quickly across so many styles. How do you kind of get in that moment? You know, how do you just flip that switch when you walk on to play?
My approach when I sit down is always the same.
Yeah.
So if I zoom out, my goals and intentions are the same no matter what music I'm playing, whether it's my own music or someone else's compositions or an improvised situation, is just to be present to the best of my ability and to support the music in the best way I can. So, you know, I can understand why someone else would maybe think of these projects being quite different.
Yeah.
Maybe on paper they are, and I respect the advent of genre and these things. It makes things a little easier to talk about maybe, or to organize. But what I see from that is it shines a light on all the things that are different between things. And it ends up being a bit divisive, you know? And for me, I just try to live in a way where I'm looking for the similarities in things and ways to bring things together, whether it's music or people, or when I can approach it from that way, it's quite comfortable. And it's just, I get to express myself tonight with this musician I really admire. I get to express myself tonight with these musicians I admire. So really, it's kind of all the same if you zoom out enough. So it's from that perspective from which I try to always play, but particularly in a situation like this where it's bouncing around, it's how much similarity can I find to just keep myself kind of centered and focused and happy.
You've sort of reached a place as a player, as a stylist, as a musician, where if somebody says your name among musicians, it references a whole series of musical associations and even values. And the legacy of drummers, I think, in the same way that if you said Tony Williams or if you said Elvin or whatever, it would trigger a series of associations that are musical. They also have to do with the sound of the drums, the way that you approach the kinds of projects that you play. What do you see as the values of what you do or the tenets of what you're doing? Are you able to see it in like a coherent set of terms?
Well, just for the record, you brought up Elvin and Tony. I wouldn't dare put myself anywhere near them. Thank you. And those are my heroes, but just to have the record
to not have
straight.
nodded and smiled and not said something about it.
I mean, that's very flattering. It's always flattering that anyone may know anything about my music or playing. And then if they also like it, that's cool too. But for me, sometimes those things can serve as more of a distraction than an aid. I've always had a bit of an underdog mentality. I kind of started playing drums a little later than a lot of my friends. I was 15, and I got rejected to a couple colleges, and I was on the waiting list. And
Where'd you get rejected?
I got rejected at Rutgers. I'm from New Jersey, so
Yeah.
I applied mostly around. So I didn't get into Rutgers. They took like one guy a year, a small program. I got into NYU, but I couldn't afford to go there. And then I was on the waiting list at William Patterson in New Jersey, which I eventually got into.
Yeah.
And rightfully so. There were a lot of guys my age that had more experience with the instrument that were quote-unquote better than me. And I never disagreed with that, but I always thought like, oh yeah, I'm kind of, my trajectory was a bit later than some of my peers. So it's always inspired me to work hard, but it also helped me keep it about the work and much less about the result.
What do you mean?
So, for example, any kind of positive attention could be a result of work, but it's the work that produced that result. So I try not to change course based on the results.
Right.
I try to just, hey, does this feel right? What led to that result? Okay, cool, grateful, thank you, maybe some positive attention or something. But I'm just going to keep on this path that led to that result, and maybe it'll lead to future positive attention. But I don't want to change course based on any attention, I guess what...
No, I hear what you're saying. People are digging me doing this, so I should do more of this.
Yes.
Or I make more money doing this, so I should do more of it.
Yes. I guess what you were saying is more of a creative thing. It's difficult for me to really quantify. I think the best musical moments for me happen when I am allowing all of my influences to coexist in a natural way. When I was younger, I thought, okay, yeah, I'm in a jazz environment. I can only allow my jazz influences to appear. I'm in a electronic environment. I can only do that. And that only got me so far, but it really wasn't me. It was me playing a character, So as I started to allow my influences to coexist and truly acknowledge my influences based on the effect they've had on my life, whether they would be agreed upon. Like, for example, when I first started playing drums, it was just Nirvana and Soundgarden and Chili Peppers, all this stuff. So Dave Grohl in my life is as important as Tony Williams.
Yeah.
And when I first got to jazz school, I wouldn't dare let anyone know I was into Dave Grohl. But I felt like I want to just play like Max Roach. I want to fit in and try to do my best. And then really, it's funny to have to put it on the record, but it's like, yeah, Dave Grohl and Tony Williams are peers in my mind. And if you really wanted to make it about who's better at the drums, that could be this whole silly discussion, But for me, when I look in the mirror, they are peers. They're hanging out in the pub in my brain, and having a conversation and sharing ideas. And it wasn't until I really let myself acknowledge the degree to which, all these influences have had on me that it really started to feel like, oh, maybe this is starting to become a more personal expression.
Yes. I talked to Chris Potter last year, and he said something about playing with Paul Motion that has really stuck with me. And I was reminded of it seeing you and Bill Frisell play the other day because of how open and free it was. Chris said, he would see Paul Motion sit down at the drums and behave as if he had never seen a set of drums before. Really try to come to the instrument with total curiosity and like a sense of wonder. And whatever technical language you're bringing to the instrument, there's an independent factor, which is can you approach the moment with total openness and a sense of surprise?
Yeah, I think of that as my favorite musicians, my favorite improvisers always seem to choose, make the perfect choice in each moment. And
does that exist?
Well, it's quite subjective,
right?
But they seem to,
yes,
right? So that's what I'm fascinated by. And if it happens to be a cool thing on the instrument too, that's fun. That's a part of my brain that can be really excited. Oh, what was that? But the order of those things is what's most important. I think it's the step one, what does the music need right now? Step two, can I provide that? When I was younger, I think back on my younger self, it was only step two. It was, what can I give the music? What can I do? Or this is what I can do here. Maybe it was right, maybe it wasn't, But when I started to think of the other way of like, what is needed now, and then can I provide it? Okay, that's a whole other question, and that's a relationship with your instrument and the more technical side. But it's much more about, for me, the thing that attracts me to that way of playing is, wow, it's so dialed in, and I think it's easy to say the best improvisers are the best listeners. My favorite musicians are the best listeners. It takes such commitment to the moment to be able to know what's, again, quote unquote, right, the right choice for that moment. And then if you can provide it, great, even better. But I think the identification of the idea is the magic. A lot of people can play a lot of great stuff on their instrument, but it's the identification of when and where, and then the what will follow,
So going back to this thing about Dave Grohl and Tony, and that's kind of when you started going to school, you didn't want to admit that you loved Nirvana and Dave Grohl. What were you working on? What were you trying to sound like? How did you...
At jazz school?
Yeah, like when you first were starting. I love the fact that you started late, and that you were turned away. I think it should be kind of underlined at that point, because there's so many phenomenal young players right now that's 15 and 16 years old. They're like seem like they're fully developed, and then here you are at 15, just getting started, and not there at 18.
Both of my parents were teachers. They're not musicians, but I always just kind of liked school. I had that in my DNA. I'll go to class, I'll study for the test. I always thought it was just easier to go to class, even if I didn't care about the class. It's frankly easier to show up and just study, and then you get an A, and then it's over.
Do the work. Just do the work.
Just do it, and then it's done if you do it. But I had a lot of friends who were like incredibly talented, and school wasn't for them, and then they wouldn't do the work, and then all the stress about I got, But I've thought a lot. I didn't realize it in the moment, but looking back, I've thought a lot about one's trajectory as a musician and where school, on the timeline, where school fits into that. I had a lot of friends who showed up first day freshman year of college who could sleep through the first 2 or 3 years of ear training, sleep through the first 2. They just had all that under their belt, and therefore they were bored, they weren't engaged. School became a drag. But for me, school was always a bit out of reach. The material was stuff I needed to learn. It wasn't stuff I knew already. So I had to go to class, and I had to work hard, and I had to stay on it.
Yeah.
So I just feel lucky that by starting later, school and the material, the way it hit my timeline, it was just perfect timing to keep me excited and motivated. Whereas for some of my friends, it was a bit disjointed on the timeline. It's almost like if they could have went to jazz school when they were 16, then it would have propelled them even further. But I have a few friends who either left and continued to play music, or some friends kind of fell out of love with music because the school thing just didn't mesh with where they were. But what I was working on was, I just wanted to learn repertoire, be able to function on a high level in traditional situations, and a lot of transcription. I was studying with John Riley at the time. I was filling books up of transcriptions, but really the big payoff was there were incredible fellow students. I learned as much from them as I did the teachers, and every night we were playing. And that was because coming from a smaller suburb, there weren't that many musicians around until you get to school and you're like, whoa, you like the same stuff I do? That I didn't know these people existed. It was the playing playing.
And were you coming to the city at that point, or at first you were staying in?
Yeah, it's about a 25-minute drive.
Yeah.
We would come in as often as we could. I didn't have a car. We were underage, so it was like, I remember like walking through the hallways in the music building, like, does anyone with the car want to, I'll pay for parking, but Joey Barron's playing at the Knitting Factory tonight. We have to go. Anyone, like just yelling into practice rooms, you know? And yeah, it was great. Also, looking back, I'm kind of grateful that there wasn't much to do at William Patterson other than practice, you know?
Yep.
So if we didn't come into the city, it's like, oh, no one wants to go in. I don't have a car. Okay, well, I guess I'll just practice or I'll play. You know, we were in this nice little bubble, whereas I'm not sure how much practicing I would have done if I was dropped in Manhattan when I was 18.
Sure.
You know? So
that could have been disruptive in an
Exactly.
interesting way. I hear you talking about the rock and roll influence. I know that scene was informative for you. But when did the electronic thing enter your world, and what did that do to your concept of what the role of acoustic drums could be?
So in college, a friend of mine gave me, I remember this was, the late 90s, so it was like the height of burned CDs, and yes, I see my friend's handwriting on this CD, his with a Sharpie. It was a Square Pusher record called Feed Me Weird Things. I think that came out in maybe 96, and this was 99 that he gave it to me, so not that far off. But, I mean, when I heard that, it really created a similar feeling in my body as it did the first time I heard Tony with Miles' band. It was, I frankly didn't know what was happening.
Did you like it?
Well, there was a visceral feeling in my body that I had to investigate. Similarly with Tony, it was way over my head the first time I heard it, but I was like, wait, this is going to change my life, and okay, now that kicked that door open, and now I'm all the way over here. And similarly with Square Pusher, it was like, I don't know what this is, but I have a lot of homework to do, and that really led me down a path where that music ended up being as important an influence as any other style,
But once again, I can imagine that at that time, it's another area of your life that you sort of had to keep separate. I mean, if you're going to go to a session or whatever, or get a gig with somebody, you're not necessarily going to walk in talking about Square Pusher.
Right. I could do it in a rehearsal room at school, shut the lights out and just improvise, and all these kinds of experiments. But yeah, it was just kind of brewing. But it's one thing particularly about electronic music. There's a great deal of mystery in how it's made. And particularly, Square Pusher is a great bass player. He plays a lot of electric bass on the recordings, but the drums, there's some recordings where he plays a little bit, but it's mostly cut up, chopped up, samples processed, all this stuff. So it's very different to say, okay, here's Max Roach on this, Clifford Brown record. I'm going to transcribe these, they're trading fours. I want to transcribe it. And I have all this information to help me with that. I've seen videos of Max play. I've seen I know his setup. I know the drums sound like this. So, he must have done this. And you can even guess, like, I think the sticking might be right, left on the snare. And then he goes but then to go to Square Pusher, guys like Aphex Twin, it's like to try to bring that to the drums. There isn't this really clean, quantifiable way to do it. And therefore, one is forced to inject their own creativity. I
mean, it's interesting because what I am reminded of when you talk about the Max Roach thing is like over and over and over, the kind of traditional trajectory of a stylist would be to try to sound like their hero, fail, but in the striving to sound like that hero, start to develop the sound. I mean, your sound is like, in some ways, it's kind of like what you're aiming for minus what you just naturally are, and then what's left over is like, that's you, What you're describing is not so dissimilar in the sense that, you're not able to make the sounds, you're not able to really totally do it, but in striving to do something that resembles what you heard on a Square Pusher record, you start to develop a style.
Absolutely, and in that case, I mean, quite often it's just simply physically impossible.
Right.
It's not a drummer playing it. It might be 2-3 loops smashed on top of each other. So it's you aim for that, and where you fall will be unique to you. I think that's what's nice. If you have a beat, say like all right, we take this Steve Gadd or something, and you'd have 5 drummers say, okay, here, Steve Gadd played this.
Exactly.
Go learn this. Everyone will come back. It'll have a hint of personality. It won't sound like Steve Gadd. I wish it was that easy to just but it'll be 5 versions of, but still kind of the same thing. 5 versions.
Yep.
But if you say, here's the Square Push record, and you send 5 guys or girls to their own room and we meet back in an hour, it's going to be 5 wildly different things, because all the things that you need to emulate, whether it's both sonically or the way you would play it, because it's so non-human, it exposes more of one's individuality in a good way.
Interesting.
So I think I'm always trying to draw influence from non-drum set elements, because I know to bring them to the drum set, I'll be forced to inject my own creativity, and therefore, like you're saying, land in a place that might be a little more unique to me than if it was just kind of a carbon copy of someone's behavior on the same instrument that I play.
Right.
You know.
And in kind of trying to solve some of those problems, your setup, the sound of the drums, the cymbals, all of that stuff sort of started to evolve. You know, I don't know if it's to what degree that is part of your sound at this point or not. If you feel like that's kind of crucial to the whole statement, or if you would sit down at a bebop kit tuned more traditionally and still feel like you're doing you.
Sound is a predetermined element per musical environment, in the sense that if the sound, okay, so I want to play with a sound that is most appropriate for a certain situation.
Yes.
And that is quite often defined by the instrument, or heavily aided by a great instrument tuned in a way that will support that situation. And yes, touch and relationship with the instrument, very important.
But the tuning and the sound, it'll inspire you, it'll determine certain things.
Absolutely. And it's almost like, I'll exaggerate a little bit to make a point, but I really think sound is so underrated. If the sound is right, you can almost play anything. I think sound supersedes vocabulary.
Wow.
Because if you think about bebop to me, yes, the vocabulary is magical and I love it, but it's, for me, on the drum set, it's the sound. And if you were to take, it's almost like if you were to sit down at Max Roach's kit and play some John Bonham licks, it's going to sound like bebop to me because of the sound. Yeah. And if Max Roach was to sit down at John Bonham's kit and play his Max Roach stuff, it's going to have this Bonham like energy, So for me, it's really, if the sound can be right, truly right, and you have to be able to get the sound, the instrument can only do so much work, then that gives you or me the freedom to then just play whatever, with an asterisk of course, respectful to that moment.
But, and you say as long as you can get the sound. I mean, I've seen you talk about it a little bit, but it seems like in that case, that's a major part of the piece of the puzzle. How much of your life in terms of practicing and developing what you do is spent looking for sounds? Yeah,
a vast majority. I mean, I think it's a really fun and rewarding exploration. And it's so much has to do with touch, and I've had to play in a lot of really quiet situations over the years. So I've been happily forced, if that makes any sense, to really investigate getting really quiet sounds from the drums and learning about the tone in those quieter dynamics. And that's helped me develop control. And, if you need to hit them too, that's fun. You can go there. But it's in those quieter dynamics, and especially in those higher tunings, the drums really allow you to explore the quieter dynamics. But also, if I need real, more electronic sounds, or inspired by that more dead or punchy, it's the instrument, but also the way you're hitting it to get those sounds. It's a constant pursuit for sure.
I think a lot of people look at you as one of the first people who started putting stuff on the drums, and changing the tones of the drums. I know you've talked about seeing Zach Danziger do it and having been excited by seeing him do it. Are these conversations? I mean, were you and Zach, I talked to Nate Wood about this a little bit too, like talking about this stuff or just kind of watching and checking it out?
Yeah, I think it was really just seeing it. I mean, when I was in college, the vast majority of the shows I was going to check out were kind of from the downtown, more avant-garde scene. Jim Black is one of my modern day heroes for sure. Jeff Ballard, Joey Barron, these guys, they were always there were always sounds outside of the drum set. And that led me to, but sometimes maybe the musical environments were a bit more abstracted, you know, but then they would give me the courage to bring those things to other environments, you know, and similarly with Zach, it was so helpful to see a human pulling this electronic stuff off in person to give me the courage to investigate it myself because it's very intimidating.
How so?
It's just so technically daunting to the point where like it's pretty easy to maybe just say, I can't do this. Why would I even try? And then you go see Jojo Mayer's band. I would go see a lot. Zach with Boomish. It's like, oh wait, maybe this is a path that is worthy of investigating, you know, instead of just ruling myself out from the start.
Right.
But yeah, you know, with Jim, I mean it when I say gave me the courage to start to incorporate other influences because sometimes I would go see Jim and I was like, well, this is grunge. Yeah. You know, but he's playing it tonic he's improvising with quote unquote jazz musicians. But it was like, wait, you're saying I'm allowed to let this stuff out? You know, it was huge to see that. So grateful for all those years of, I've 3-4 times a week at shows for sure. I was that guy right next to if there was a chair next to the hi-hat stand, I was that guy.
You were that guy.
Yeah. You know, a guy like Zach is 100% integrated.
Yeah.
The acoustic and the electronic. And he's worked so hard to get to that place of comfort. For me, it's much more divided. Yeah. It's kind of one or the other. I feel very comfortable in the electronic realm on its own. I feel very comfortable at the drums on their own. So when I combine them, the electronics typically serve more as a texture.
Yeah.
More ambient layers, less so drum function. But I'm fascinated by the combinations for sure.
One thing I've seen you do lately is you've got a little subby pad off to the side that you'll choose to sort of like, you know, layer in with a kick drum, whatever, reach over and grab the sub. It seems like there would be a ergonomically easier way to do that from playing rather than having to lose an arm. But the pad, you've got this pad next to you on your right. Sometimes it is like becoming a part of your electronic setup. Why are you deciding to do it that way as opposed to using
like triggers?
Yeah,
or
triggers,
something?
Exactly.
Yeah, that again is I'm a little intimidated by that ultimate integration. I mean, it's a bit pessimistic, but I think about all the things that could go wrong. You know, whereas when they're a bit more separate, it's a little more relaxing. I mean, I'm basically using that pad as a glorified sampler, just to store sounds and reach for if it feels like the moment is right.
Is it hard to stop yourself from reaching for it? I mean, that's the one thing about it is that it's like candy sitting there off to the side.
Very, very mindful of the balance to not use it too much. But I really think of it as like a synthesizer or something, you know? It's just another sound in the mix. And I've used it a handful of times over the past 10 days. Particularly, there were 2 duo environments that were super fun. And therefore, there was, in that situation, there's just simply more space. And it's incredibly powerful to let the space be space.
Yeah.
But also really nice to just, hey, I'm just going to hit this kind of reverbed out talking thing that's just going to add some mystery and a new layer. And we you know, just change the lens a little bit. Mm-hmm. It informs the improvising too, for sure. And I do like this idea of it's premeditated. The sample I grab, you know, I'm just collecting things from all over. And it's really interesting. I love the idea of coincidental interaction. If let's say we sampled this recording and I had it with me and I hit play and I was playing a beat.
Yes.
our brain naturally wants to combine the things we hear.
Yes.
So all of a sudden our voices are now in time
Yes.
with this beat that
Yes.
I'm playing. Those are magical moments of how did he know that this was gonna? I didn't know. It's just, and those moments of discovery are really satisfying.
I was lying awake once in a hotel room, and there was what sounded like unbelievable drummer one floor up from me. Just like maybe playing on a pad or something, crossing the bar line, really beautiful, just the deepest phrasing. And, 10 or 15 minutes, and I'm going like, this is some great. And I realized it's the rain. It's the rain on a gutter, and I had started to apply some time against it.
You superimposed
Yes.
your own bar lines.
Yes.
Yeah.
The brain automatically wants to connect to things that it's hearing and give it time. Does that affect your playing? Do you try to achieve that same kind of crossover rhythmic thing within what you play?
Quite difficult to do.
Yeah.
Maybe as a counterpoint to something that someone else is playing.
Yes. Metric modulation, in a sense, is that. I mean, it's taking something that feels like that it doesn't automatically feel natural against the pulse, and it's playing it against the pulse.
Yeah, and with enough insistence, it starts to steal your ear and become the new pulse.
Can you tell me about that?
I mean, repetition is as powerful a tool we have in music and life.
Yeah.
For both good and bad.
Yeah.
But repetition is something I've been thinking about a lot lately. Repetition in the proactive sense, not the passive sense. Something that electronic music really opened my mind up to was repetition and trance.
Yeah.
Via repetition.
Yes.
And I think like drum machines and some electronic music gets a bad rap because it's a maybe more passive repetition. You can hit play and it will play this one measure of a beat until you hit stop.
Yep.
That's passive. So you make one decision and the next decision is to just stop. But I've been thinking, I love the effect repetition has in certain musical situations, but okay, let's say I want to play the same measure over and over. But the more proactive way is I play the measure, and as that measure's ending, I make another decision. And that decision happens to be, I'm going to choose to play the same thing again.
But I think that's what being married is like.
Interesting.
I think it's waking up every morning and saying, I commit myself to this right now today. I'm here again today. It's not a single commitment that you make. So many things in life are like that. Showing up, you don't show up one time. You show up again and again and again.
And that will be felt by your partner. And the other way will be felt too, maybe in a less cool way.
Right.
But yeah, yes, I'm choosing to play the same thing again. Yeah. Yes, I'm choosing to play the same thing again. And it's incredibly empowering to know at any moment I could choose to play something else, but it's almost like, and then especially in an improvised situation, I think one of the most punk things you could do is to choose proactively to play one thing over and over. And it's like, wait, what's he doing? He's just playing this one thing. He could do whatever he wants.
Yes.
And I think that can be so powerful.
Yeah.
And especially in like, as a drummer, I really try to do my homework. I'm so drawn to, the origins of the drum and West African folkloric music, and particularly as those people made their way to Cuba and, the West, but particularly Afro-Cuban and rumba. It's just so powerful, and it has this trance. If you zoom out, say like rumba, I saw this band Osain Del Monte in Havana last year. I could easily say absolutely top 5 live musical experiences I've ever had. Quite possibly number 1.
Wow.
And I've just never felt that way. My body, it was a new feeling in my body to be in that room. And if you zoom out, you could say it's just the same thing over and over, depending on to what degree you zoom out. And it sounds like, they're just playing the same thing. Even you could even say almost song to song. Yeah. It's just voice.
It's one
and
thing.
percussion.
They're doing one thing.
And when you zoom in, it has, for me, it was the most magical example of it appeared to be repetition. But when you really pay attention, things were ever changing. and really it was satisfying my brain, the musician in me that wanted to know what was going on, hyper stimulated, but hitting my body in a way that I hadn't felt, and the energy, relentless, spiritual, and whatever that means. It overwhelmed. Every sense was maxed out. And particularly the repetition, the impression of repetition with still constant interaction and ever-changing elements. That for me, I know it's a bit of a sidetrack.
No, I like it. I mean, it reminds me of sometimes what I feel in your playing is that you'll set up some expectation and then you subvert that expectation. Like, I played this thing, I played it for 3 bars, and so my brain is going to make an assumption that on the 4th bar you're going to do it, and then it modulates, or it does a thing, or you've moved it to a different part of the kit. So, in a sense, that's also playing with repetition. That only works if you've established a certain repeated motif that then you can subvert. You can't subvert anything if you haven't established it.
I think as drummers, we have to work even harder via repetition. We have to work harder to create these expectations. I think a melodic instrument, our brain grabs melodies very quickly.
It sees an interval, it makes an assumption, and then you can immediately change.
3 blind mice, 3 blind mice. After 2 of those, you know the song. You're walking around singing it. But if I play boop, boop, bop, boop, boom, that could just, like the sticks might have fallen on the drums and played that. So I need to play it again, boom, boom, ba, ba, ba. And then it's like, oh, maybe he's just like messing with his pedal or whatever. So I feel like I have to work that much harder to really say, hey, this is important to me. I want you to remember this, or I want you to know, like, this is what we're dealing with. So then that takes discipline and perseverance
and commitment.
Commitment to communicate that to you. And then once it's been communicated, or if that's your choice, then now I can start to turn it on its head, or now you will start to develop expectations that I could either happily deliver or intentionally not.
And that's very satisfying too. I mean, I think that what is so satisfying as a listener to that is that you realize that a trick has been played on you, or that something has been done to you. You know, that there's an interplay between you and the music.
And to make you maybe comfortable with an idea, hey, let's enjoy this together, and you kind of maybe settle into your chair, and just at that moment, I get you back out to the edge, but then return to the comfortable thing.
I feel like I need to ask you about a couple of things that are just happening, because I don't know when we're ever going to sit together like this again. But you're so associated with New Jersey. I'm sure everybody's been asking you, and I got to ask you too. I mean, it's not just that people know you're from New Jersey. I mean, you made a real effort to let your relationship to New Jersey, to the East Coast, be established. It's so much who you are, and then you moved to L.A. Why was it time to go to California?
My wife is born and raised in L.A., and Gretchen Parlato, an amazing singer and person, and the way Jersey is home for me,
L.A. is home for her,
and it was like, my wife wants to move home. Cool.
Could
have been St. Louis. It could have been Portland. It's L.A. And I feel like I still have family in New Jersey. We moved 7 months ago. I've been in New York 6 times. I feel like we'll always have. We started our family here. Feel a strong connection. It's important to us to always return and to maintain our relationship to New York and Jersey. And it's just life, I mean, it feels right. We have a 5-year-old son. I get it for sure. I get the lifestyle, especially for a kid, in and out of the house every day, the consistency and with the climate, and he's really loving it. So it feels good.
I feel like there is also a creative thing that's happening in LA. Have you been able to connect there and to see kind of what your local musical life might look like?
I mean, because it was a family move, it was very organic, and it didn't have these like career pressures of I got to hit the ground running, I got to hustle and get in on this. But there's a really strong and diverse web of musicians, and some of which I've just known as LA guys, and a lot of which have come from New York. It's a pre-existing relationship. So I've gotten my hands dirty a little bit and look forward to more. But I have to say, it's really relaxing to, again, the purpose of the move is quite relaxing. And really, still travel a bunch, and it's when I'm home, I'm kind of just home and hanging out, which feels good. So yeah, but I'm still investigating, trying to. There's a lot. It's a big city. There's a lot to check out.
I know that you and your wife, Gretchen, did a panel here this week about managing a creative marriage. You have two people with artistic ambition and career ambition. How do you guys manage that?
Hyper communication.
Yeah.
I think we're lucky that we started as kind of fans of each other first. So it's like I really admire her as a musician. I'm always rooting for her. You know, so the opportunities, I think there are times where, you know, maybe I'll say, should I do this? Like, what do you crave? Of course, go,
Right.
You gotta go do it, you know, and vice versa. Being apart sucks, you know, I wish we could just always be together, especially with our son. But it's real life, and we're very mindful of the amount of time at a time that we're gone or separate. As long as we balance that, and the trick of just really when we're home to get just being present.
Yes.
And really giving everything I have the same way I try to do so with the music, you know.
Right. Mark Guiliana, thank you for sharing the process and the result.
Yep, my pleasure. Thank you very much.
There he was, my friends. Mark Guiliana. Let the music do the talking. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, people. Thank you, Spencer. I'll be back again next week with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.